I want to thank you, Sergeant Willie Pete, for sending me the link to the video you did. Dear Black Muslims, I forgot that you've done this video. And I'm listening to this in pieces and then recording so that I don't miss important points that you make. And I'm still going to try to keep this short. So I can't remember right now everything that you said in that video, but I'm listening, then recording, then listening and recording. So I'm going to start by saying that even though I've covered this subject before, even before I knew about your video, I'll cover it again. The discrimination of which you speak by non-black Muslims against black Muslims is not news even to Muslims in all black countries. You see, contrary to popular belief, Africans in Africa are familiar with white supremacy, and we're even familiar with the ideas of Arab supremacy, or even just the ideas that non-blacks and even many black folks have of non-black superiority. I mean, there are people that just assume in Africa, you're not black, you're superior to black people. And even black people that think this. So an example is that Ghanaian Muslims prefer to not work for Lebanese anymore. And they know that Arabs aren't very nice. Now, there is the Ghanaian that went to Lebanon, and she was with the Dia family, and she was found dead, I know. But the point is that in general, most Ghanaians, Muslim and not, prefer to not work for the Lebanese, and they know that Arabs aren't very nice to them. See, as an example, I actually tried to tell a Ghanaian lady once that my closest friend here in the Gulf was not like the Lebanese Arabs that she knew in Ghana, and she still refused, despite that I could vouch for his character. She said, but what will his wife act like? And I straight told her, I don't know enough about a wife, but I know that if she's oppressive, he'll defend you and return you to your country. What he won't do is oppress you, but I can't speak about the wife because he's actually a practicing Muslim. And she said, I'll decline. Thank you. Now, this friend of mine told me himself, black, the citizens here, the black citizens are known for being fair and just, and they don't hold grudges. And you're from the U.S., but you're black and you're just as fair as they are. So is this a racial thing? And I said to him, and most people know how to be fair and just, but we tend to hate unfair treatment because we see it. And he said, but the thing is, they don't hold grudges, and you seem to hold grudges. And I told him with a straight face, Sergeant Willie Pete, that my instinct for justice was from God, but it was through my African blood. But my ability to hold a grudge was from my white ancestors. I wish I could have photographed his face, but I had no camera. In any case, I'm simply trying to point out that even in Africa, we're aware of the differences between us and Arabs. Additionally, I've come across some new knowledge. Even many West Africans may not know this, but Arabs never conquered tropical Africa, even partially, except maybe the island of Zanzibar. And from what I understand, those were Omanis that came and traded, then married local women, and that their ascendancy came through nonviolence. That it had more to do with just them amassing gold as merchants than it had to do with violence. But that at that time, the Omanis were still known to be quite dark. So their clothing and language at that time would have been a bigger difference than their phenotype, based on the descriptions by the Britishers themselves of the Omanis centuries later. So keep in mind that the populations of the Red Sea and Arabian Peninsula have not been getting darker over time, but they've been getting paler according to everybody's observations. So if that's the case, by the time the British observed the Omanis, it was still dark. They would have actually been getting a little bit paler since the time they had gotten Zanzibar. Now, next, you mentioned racism in Islam. You don't want me to say this, but I'll say it because I have to get somewhere with this. Racism is categorically forbidden in the religion itself. Now, if you mean racism between Muslims, then I understand, because that's like fornication between Christians. It's not allowed. Racism between Christians is not allowed, but they're widely practiced and they're not considered outrageous. So there might be your valid point that Muslims are racist despite Islam, not because of it. Christians routinely have non-marital sex, maybe less than we think, maybe more. But is it in spite of the Bible or because of it? I mean, the Bible is not what makes the Christians go out there and fornicate. It's in spite of it, right? So, also the word abd means worshiper, but abd does mean slave, and abid is the plural for slaves. I don't know the plural for worshipers, but I heard you say the word Abid, and if that's what you heard, then they were talking about a worshiper. If you heard Abid, then they were referring to multiple slaves. And yes, they do call black people slaves. That's true. And that is an outrage because it's not based on nationality. It's based on blackness. And I admit that the Arab world is not united on anything except arguing, being proud of being Arabs, and calling us slaves. I mean, the Arabs argue with each other, but these are things about which they are united. But see, this is why we Africans can look at the religion and say it's true, but we can't follow Arabs and we look down more on them every day. And this has been going on a long time. I mean, back in the early 2000s, I heard a Gambian and a Senegalese couple of friends say that Africa must remain vigilant against Arabs on its soil and in its Islamic schools. And frankly, Senegalese have kept a distance from me due to my phenotype, while Gambians from right next door have taken me as one of us. I don't blame the Senegalese, though. I mean, the Lebanese are the Arabs with which they've had to deal. The Gambians grow up using English, so they know the difference between Arabs and whites, and they've got more awareness of our kinship. And so they recognize my English speech pattern and voice as being black American. Either way, I haven't found an African from the tropics that looks up to Arabs. I don't find that, bro. I found North Africans that look up to other Arabs, and even then, they don't really look up to the Khalijis, the Gulf Arabs, so I really can't say that. I just can't find them. Now, there are times I have to calm down some black folks, African from the continent, or from the United States, or from the Caribbean, because they might say things about Arabs that aren't true, or they exaggerate the frequency of something that exists. So if you're mentioning any esteem in which Arabs are held by tropical black Africans, then you're beating a dead horse. Right now, even Malaysians don't like them that much, and I heard Indonesians don't either. I know Filipinos don't, the Muslims and the non-Muslims alike. They don't like them that much. I enjoyed my time in Malaysia because they kept the Arabs in check. And the Malay people are known for being really nice. I mean, that's one group of people that doesn't really have it in for us, black people. You know, the Filipinos, the Malays, whether they're Malaysian, Indonesian, or Bruneian, that group of people, the Singaporean Malays, that ethnicity, that linguistic group, the Malay people, and neighboring Southeast tropical Asians just don't have it in for black people like that. But the Malays don't give the Arabs any wiggle room anymore because a car accident killed a Malay woman. Arabs are not the face of Islam, and no one lets them forget it either. As for Pakistanis, well, this also includes Indians, by the way. We've been done with them, sir, since we found out that they preferred lighter skin like the Arabs do, and we call them names. I mean, I've seen this with my own two eyes, so you might think you're super black nationalist, super pro-black. You may fancy yourself that, bruh. It don't get no more pro-blacker than someone who believes that God is against colorism. God is against those who discriminate against people that are darker. It don't get no blacker than that. And I told an Indian friend of mine once that he was not welcome to pass out Islamic tracts in a black neighborhood, and I didn't even live in that neighborhood. I told him this because some other Muslims that were black knew about the plan, and they told me to say to him, tell him don't do it. Now, he can give them to us, and we'll filter them and do it, or if we know him, he can come with us. I told this friend of mine, even I'm not welcome to do this if I was with him, that we would have to accompany the black Muslims once they knew him and me better, mostly him. And he said to me, African Americans seem really sensitive about from where they take Islam. And my answer was yes, absolutely. You can't be from another background, especially from India, Pakistan, or the Arab world, or Iran, or Afghanistan. You know, these semi-black but not quite black Muslim areas. You can't be from these areas because we already know that most of y'all use skin bleach. We already know that y'all don't like being called black. So they don't know that you're an exception to this. They don't know you actually prefer black folks over white folks. That's not the way they see it. They don't know this about you. When they know, then it's cool. Now, as far back as 2000, that was before I was Muslim. I know that African American Muslims and African Muslims living in the U.S. were against the non-black Muslims for political reasons. See, you remember that at that point, Bush was running for, 1999, Bush was running for election. You can remember that. I'm sorry, 2000, he was running for election. And in 2001, as we all know, he was sworn in. So 2000, he was running for election. Did you know that the Arabs wanted to vote for him because Al Gore had a Jewish running mate? And they thought that if Al Gore got in office, the Jewish running mate was going to support Israel. That's what they thought. They didn't understand that vice presidents don't get to set foreign policy like that anyway, until deputized by the president. They also did not understand that it doesn't matter who gets in office, Israel's going to get that support. Because AIPAC, they got dirt on Democrats and Republicans. They didn't understand. I tried to tell them and they would interrupt me. And eventually I was just like, you know what? Go ahead and vote for him. I hope he bombs your asses, you tragic desert mulattoes. And sure enough, what happened? So, when I became Muslim, I already knew not to trust people lighter skinned than us on average. I already knew. Matter of fact, I thought the problem was worse than it was. I was like you. I thought that they had used Islam as a political tool to conquer Africa before I became Muslim. When I became Muslim, I had actually done research and learned that no, this wasn't the case. And truth be told, a secret that has been kept is that Arabs never thought they could conquer tropical Africa. One, because of malaria. They could not mobilize an army in the tropics in that region because malaria would have wiped out the army before combat would have. And two, they didn't think they could beat black Africans. Now, they launched some raids in certain parts of Eastern Africa, but they did this where they could quickly get in and get out. They were more likely to go to markets already located in Eastern Africa, buy them, and then transport them back. They were more likely to do that. Did they march a lot through the Sahara? They probably did. So there may have been a lot of people that were actually killed in the process of being transported out. So I'm not knocking that. But as far as them going in and doing the damage that Europeans did in Western and Central Africa, no, they did not have that capacity. They were scared to F with Ethiopia or Abyssinia back in those days. And they didn't want no parts of Nubia either. So no, they weren't going to do it. That's a secret now that many Arabs don't want to admit and many Africans don't know. Anyway, moving on. You said that many who come from Muslim families are going to give up Islam. And I would venture to say that many probably will, but it's not going to be for the reason that you mentioned. We already have covered this topic. I mean, we internally have covered this topic. We already know they're not the face of Islam. So while in fact some of them may give up their Islam, and you have, I mean, hell, you've probably been romantically involved with some of the ladies that did, by your own admission. The truth be told, when they give up Islam after being in these non-Muslim nations, they will usually be doing it for the same reason that many people, you may take this personally, you may not, but the same reason that many people have for not accepting Islam when they have done the research and learned about it. Same reason. What is that reason? Very simply put, it is because they don't want to exercise the discipline that it requires. There you go. If you like Hennessy, or if you like any alcoholic beverage, you may think that you're going to be a bad Muslim if you become Muslim anyway, because you might not give it up. That's what you feel. You may, if you accepted it, you may not give it up. It's possible. There are Muslims that can't, they won't say that the faith is wrong. They're convinced it is true. They just say, I got a weakness for the liquor, and they try to hide that sin from other people. A lot of times hiding the sin does make the liquor less palatable, because you get sick of thinking about how you're going to hide this from people, and and eventually they stop. It's like smoking too. A lot of Muslims actually stop smoking. Usually they're not Arab though, ironically. A lot of Muslims stop smoking, and one of the reasons that they quit smoking is because they get sick of trying to hide the habit. And they just say, shuck this fit. Eventually they scale back. But a lot of people that can't. I mean, there are Muslims that took, they bang, they snort up coke, black or Arab, or Pakistani for that matter. So it's true that it does require a disciplined lifestyle. And it is more of an outrage when you have a sin like these things in the Muslim community. However, many outsiders think I can't be Muslim and do this. And many Muslims think, well, I don't want to feel guilty about doing this, so it becomes easy to just give up the faith. Those are the true reasons that people will give it up. Whether they hide it or openly come out and say it, those are the true reasons. There are certain things they just don't want to abide by. And it's not oppression, it's self-discipline. You've also said that tribalism and nationalism are going to have to come in front of religion. Well, actually in Africa, oftentimes it has. I mean, how do you meet Somalis? Well, that's because they left Somalia. Why did they leave Somalia? Because Somalis put tribalism, and they're related to each other, by the way. They put tribalism above their own religion. They speak the same language with different dialects. They still speak the same language, and they have the same religion. They put tribalism above their own religion between themselves, and they're related. They share ancestry, and they put it above. They put the bad above the good. So it's not like black folks don't know that. It's not like that. As a matter of fact, in Western Africa, Muslims are less likely to put that tribalism above the faith because people from Muslim tribes can and do marry. Fulani and Hausa can and do get married. Now, I'm not sure exactly who all the Mandingo can marry generally other Muslims. I don't know if they can marry Fulani or not. I'm not really sure. But Mandinka and Wolof people can get married. Hausa and Wolof can get married. I'm pretty sure that the Hausa and the Mandinka can get married. Now, in Somalia, you got tribes that just recently begun to start intermarrying with each other, and they've been Muslim since their own written history. So, at the end of the day, you could say that it has to come before religion. Well, it's not supposed to come before our faith, but that doesn't mean that it's not been understood by black people. So if that's what you want black folks to understand, they've understood it and have fought civil wars over this. And that's how you've met the ones you've met. Other thing is, I noticed that you mentioned Somalis oftentimes in this. And the thing is that many Somalis don't look up to Arabs. Now, the Daru, it has been said for a long time that the Daru do have Arab ancestors. There's even been, this is the irony of it, there has been talk amongst them that they come from Oman. And as I said before, at the time that they came from Oman, the Omanis were known to be various shades, but overwhelmingly dark. So again, if they came from Arabs, the evidence right now is that they came from what we would have called black Arabs. If you want to use Somalis as an example, there are Somalis that marry Arabs. Let me tell you this, though. My sister-in-law, married to my wife's brother-in-law, married a black Arab. He's an Emirati. His origins are from the Sudan. He's an Emirati citizen. And my wife's sister married him. He only speaks Arabic. He understands a little bit of Somali. But my wife's sister understands English, Somali, and Arabic all fluently and speaks them all fluently. Now, she'll say, yeah, it's actually true. We do have Arab ancestors. She said that, but she does not deny being black. She chose to marry a black Arab. So actually, to be honest with you, no, you're not going to find a whole lot of black women marrying non-black Arab men. You don't find that much. It's generally considered easier, but they don't do it. Actually, even though it's considered more difficult, you will find more black Arab men marrying non-black Arab women. And if a black man that's not even Arab makes the same amount of money as a citizen, black or non-black, let's say, black or red, we'll say that, because I'm not calling them white, even though they call themselves white. But let's say black or bronze. If they make the same amount of money that a black or bronze Arab man would make in that country, they could conceivably marry a citizen that is not black. The parents may be against it, or the parents may say, well, you're not getting any proposals because a lot of women are not getting any marriage proposals due to the economies. And so then that's what may wind up happening. Now, I'm not endorsing this. I'm simply saying you actually are more likely to find black Arab men marrying bronze Arab women. That's what I'm getting at. My second ex-wife came from that. Her mother was not dark. We'll say that. Her mother was indistinguishable from the Arabs of the Levant, even though she was North African. Her father was black. Both of them were Amazigh, or what you call Berber. So anyway, I'm simply saying this to say that that was actually more often likely to be the case because, as you said, the men do look for the palest complexions in the women. Actually, they're worse about that than African or African American or African Caribbean men are, if you want to know the truth. A darker skinned woman here has a better chance at finding a white non-Arab than she does at finding a bronze Arab husband, especially if he has money. You were correct when you said that they would not call Malcolm a slave to his face. That's true. They would not do that. They wouldn't call Muhammad Ali slave to his face. It is very true. Celebrities will probably get a better type of treatment. That happens across the board in general. Yes, I would admit that. But also, when you said what's the name of that big box they worship around, I think you meant the Kaaba. Kebab is actually a food. So I mention that because I don't want someone who's fluent in Arabic to make fun of you for mixing the two up. Yeah. Now, I would say that they may see it as propaganda. You were also right when you said that the Arab views himself as another white man. Yes, they don't view themselves as European. That is true. But they do count themselves as white. Even though they're aware of a racial difference between them and Europeans, they still view themselves as white. It's complicated, but that's the best way I could describe it. That is very true. It's funny because some of them, when they say Abd here and I call them out on it and I say insult white people or don't ever talk to me again, some of them say A'udhu Billah, meaning, and when you know what that means, I seek God's refuge from that, or astaghfirullah. And I say to them, you need to say that for a different reason. Insult white people, you terrorist. But others will say, actually, you know what? You're right. Sorry about that. Yeah. And may Allah punish the white folks for what they've done. So their attitudes do vary, but they generally do see themselves as being white. Yeah, that's true. I'm not knocking that. I mean, I'm knocking that view they have, but I'm not knocking your point. Yeah, they do, and this is a problem. That's what I meant to say. So that being said, it is very true that spirituality must have started with black people because humanity must have started with black people, and humanity is naturally a spiritual species. However, you mentioned bastardized versions of books that outside people gave us. Well, even black nationalists who are also Muslim will tell you that the Quran has been unchanged. Now, Uthman preserved the pronunciation by adding a codicy or vowel marks. He did do that, but that was not to change it. It was actually to preserve it because there were certain letters that actually were written the same, but they were two different letters. It was done so that non-Arabs could learn, and today Arabs learn the Arabic language the same way. You see, there was a point where, I'm just going to put it like this. There's one letter that looks like a circle, roughly. And it can have an H sound, or it could sound like the last syllable of, it could sound like the last syllable of Dominica or Jamaica. It could sound like the last syllable of that, the vowel sound, or Grenada. So that A ending, it could also have that sound. Now, which one is it supposed to sound like, the H or the A? What they did was they put two dots over it if it was supposed to sound like an A at the end of certain words. And then if it was supposed to sound like an H, then they just left it as it was. Now, this was done because Arabs could look at a word and tell how they were supposed to pronounce it if they were literate, but many of them were not. But non-Arabs who were literate in their own languages would have a rough time learning Arabic. So Uthman preserved the pronunciation, actually. That's why he did it. And to this day, everybody memorizes the same Quran. And it is the most memorized book, and people are not arguing over what it is. So, that being said, we can't say that this book, God forbid that I even think something like this, that it is a bastardized version of what someone else came with. And you said that black Muslims are going to have to wake up on our own. Well, bro, we did that. I mean, I'm aware of us having done that as far back as 1995, certainly by 2000. And then again, when I became Muslim in 2002. So yeah, I mean, every time I've turned around, black Muslims from the Caribbean, from the motherland, and from the United States, and from the UK, and from Canada have woken up. Multiple times we've woken up. There were times we didn't. Like maybe the 70s and 80s, we were all like the Arabs are our brothers. I'd heard stuff like that. But I'm just going to call it what it is, man. I mean, since then, that rhetoric died down a long time. You don't find black Muslims talking that stuff. We are supposed to be there. Well, actually, they were supposed to be our brothers. We're not the ones that pushed them away. Just like I say in red pill circles, black men did not push black women away. It was the reverse. It's the same thing here. Black people did not push non-black Muslims away. It was non-black Muslims who pushed black Muslims away. And even then, it wasn't the Southeast Asian Muslims that pushed us away. It wasn't even the Eastern European Muslims that pushed us away. The Bosnians ain't doing this. They're not the problem. It was the semi-Negro Muslims who pushed us away. The mulattoes, if you will, is probably what you and I would call them. The Persians, the Afghans, who actually started the concept of whiteness and gave it to the Europeans later. The Arab, the Pakistani, and the Indians. Hell, even the Muslims from Bangladesh didn't push us away. We're different from them. Languages don't match up, but they didn't push us away. We didn't have to push them away. So it's really not as simple as everybody that's lighter than you has pushed you away. It's most people that are lighter than us have pushed us away. And so now we're pushing them away. We don't trust them. They can't lead us in prayer. You think I'm going to pray behind somebody lighter skinned than me from a background that looks down on us? Are you serious, man? Why would I do that? No, bro. So, anyway, you are right that we have to wake up on our own, but I'm just saying you're not wrong. It's just that we've already done it. So again, that's beating a dead horse. If there's a nigga wake up call, we got that a long time ago, and now we're giving them the half nigga cracker wake up call. You want to see black people push out some folks for not being black enough? Well, you're seeing this already happening. Black Muslims are now looking at others and saying, you're not black enough politically. You're not even pro-black enough. You don't have to be genetically black or genetically anything else for that matter. Because races are equal in Islam. The issue is this. We understand already that if you prefer the oppressor over the oppressed, your religion is suspect, if not null and void altogether. I have read a hadith that whoever sides with the oppressor has gone forth from Islam, meaning he's left Islam. I read this hadith. I don't know how sound it is, but I do understand that the moral conscience of an individual who sides with the oppressor, knowing he is an oppressor, is definitely called into question. He is not equal to the one who sides with the oppressed against the oppressor. They are not the same. We know this. And that's why we look at them like we do. Like, you stay your butt over there. You want to come in here and pray, that's fine, but you ain't running nothing. You are not going to walk up on that minbar and give us a sermon Friday or any other day. You can't do it. And yes, there is a phenotype. It's not formal, but in black masajid, whether they're black, American, or African, there is a phenotype requirement, even though this is not something we're even conscious of. This is a subconscious thing I noticed. You simply can't be too non-black looking and get up on the minbar because people won't trust you. That's real. I can go to the Gambian masjid back in the city I've lived in as an adult when I go back to the States. I can't give a khutbah. I can't give a sermon any day of the week. I could barely make an announcement without getting permission first. And I'm black, although you would disagree. And frankly, I understand why they have that sentiment. I don't think it's necessarily fair. It's not very careful. But then on the other hand, it actually is kind of careful about something else. So I'm torn as to how I'm supposed to feel about that. But then again, when I speak, like I said, if they know me, they're cool with it. But if they don't know me, they're not going to tolerate it. And I know the logical reason why. So I don't even argue with them about it. And so you said that the Arab Muslim is retarded. Well, That does depend. I mean, I go hard on them, but I'll be honest and say I'm living here. It really does depend on from person to person and even region to region. Hell, even tribe to tribe. I go hard on them because I teach their kids. They're teenagers. But I can honestly say that from town to town and even from year to year, it does change and it is improving. I go hard on them and I'm up here giving them credit for that. Not because I live in their country, because I don't give a rat's behind. If they say to me, you know what, black, we don't want you here no more, I say, okay, that's fine. Just don't send me back to the States or any other white country. Let me get myself to another nation. I know where to go next. Now fit the guck out my face. Give me my passport and I'm out. I get that. So what I'm getting at is that you sit up and you say that they're retarded. Well, I understand you don't live here. You hear about what they used to be. But then again, keep in mind, you've heard what white folks want you to think about them. They've heard what white folks want them to think about you. If it's wrong for them to believe everything white folks say, it's wrong for you to believe everything white folks say. What's it going to be? We got to be fair about this. They've been unfairly stereotyped for things they did not do. And so have we. Do they marry and do they cousins? The further away from bigger cities you get, yes, the more they do it. And I do knock that to a certain extent. It's an option for them, but what I knock is that they only do that, and then by the eighth generation in a row, they got health problems and they're never retarded for that reason. But by the eighth generation in a row, they got other health issues. However, the mental retardation, or what we exaggerate to call mental retardation, actually has more to do with them just being intellectually lazy. You're right, they can't be intellectuals. African Muslims can be intellectuals. You again mentioned Somalis, like with these beheadings and things. Well, if they cut one guy's head off because he left and became a Christian, the truth be told, the Sharia says that if you are Muslim and you leave for another faith, in many cases, yeah, they're going to make sure you're an adult, make sure you're sane. If that's the case, you have time to ask questions as to what led you to a crisis of faith and resolve it. But a lot of people may say, nope, that's okay. And then truth be told, they may have cut somebody's head off for a different reason, because the news does not always get it right in any of these countries, to tell the truth. So I don't really know much about it, but when you say that they can't be serious Muslims and be intellectuals, I beg to differ. Because in actuality, no matter what they practice in the culture, even though a lot of anti-intellectuals will try to use Islam as a shield or a blanket against the responsibilities of having to be intellectual, again, that's not what they are supposed to do. And the best examples of this are going to be judges in Sharia courts. That's the best example. They got to be intellectuals to be judges. However, they also got to know the religion. They don't get to just be like your average regular person that just memorizes certain things and it walks around looking a certain way. It's not like that. However, I understand. I mean, you and I don't hang out. We don't even know each other personally. And I don't think you really could stand hanging out with me, even though I don't harm anybody. Yeah, I actually put this into practice in the way that I live. And I'm aware of flaws, but in general, I do believe that this is the way to live, even when I fail to do it because of human limits and weaknesses. But that would bother you because there are certain things I would not be able to bring myself to do, and you may find them to be normal. I cannot look at tricking like it's a normal thing. Other people can. A lot of people that are red pill, they look at tricking and they say, well, you know what? It's probably the safest way. And I say, well, in certain environments it is, but that's not the norm and that's not what's natural. So I get it. You may not be able to hang out with me, but it ain't because I'm not an intellectual. It is because actually for very intellectual reasons, I can apply this and say I can put my faith in this because I researched it. Before I became Muslim, when I was thinking about it, someone said, you thinking about it? Yes. What happens if someone finally comes to you after all these years and shows you that it's not true? They can prove it to you. I said, well, if that was the case, they would have done it to someone else already. And I haven't heard of that. But to answer your question, if I'm unlucky enough to be the first person that somebody can walk up to and does walk up to with some kind of proof that it is not true, I would still say, well, if it is not true, everything else is even more false. I still can't replace it with something else, even atheism. So if, in fact, every religion was man-made, then this would still be the least man-made, and I'm telling you it ain't man-made. If all of them were altered by men, and I understand that this has been misunderstood by men, but if all of them had actually been altered, like if every single revelation God sent down to man had been altered, and I don't believe that about this, but if that was the case, this would have still been the least altered faith. So if God was going to judge mankind by what we believe, but every single time he revealed something, people were able to change it without exception, then this would be the closest thing to an exception. So I would still rather stand in front of my Lord having subscribed to this. And yet and still, I'm telling you that that's not even what happened in this case. People did try and they failed miserably. So when you say that the worst intellectuals are Muslims, in actuality, sir, the worst intellectuals are probably Muslims that don't practice, and you would be disgusted if you knew what they're supposed to do and what they're doing. And that would actually be a lot of people around this part of the world, and Muslims that don't practice in the subcontinent. Because again, they don't learn their faith. And then even worse than us would be certain groups of Hindus. Oh yeah. Yeah, tell me about it. Because, I mean, if you're going to talk about the anti-intellectualism, why don't you bang on the Hindus for that? They got 3 million gods. They really think that the universe is run by 3 million gods, and no two of them ever had an argument and knocked the other one out. They don't even consider this. If you want to talk about who is the least intellectual, okay, then how is it that when you're alive right now, you don't want to be worshipped? Naturally, you don't want to, because you know you're human and you know your limits. But when you have passed away and you can do even less dead than when you were alive, your descendants might worship you as an ancestor. How you going to sit up and say that we're the least intellectual? No, bro, we're not the least. I mean, we're pretty much all over the spectrum, the smartest to the dumbest you find among us, and various races too. This does happen, but you're going to talk about who's the least intellectual, bro. Come on now. No. We can't take credit for that, because if we were the least intellectual and it was something that we could not help, then we would actually have a mitigated responsibility. We don't. We're accountable. You rightly said that we're going to have to challenge our elders. Well, I mean, before I heard you say that, I already had been doing that to a certain extent. And the truth be told, this is going to actually kind of blow your mind. The ones that are challenging the elders the most, believe it or not, the ones that are challenging the elders the most at this point are the second generation Arab and Desis Muslims. They are challenging their parents the most. Yes, they are the ones. I'm not saying that they're necessarily the best allies and friends that we're going to have, but they're still challenging their elders even more than we are, because they're saying to the elders, look, I'm not going to side with England against Africa. You ain't going to get me to do it. Africa didn't come in and colonize the country that you left. See, it is them that are sitting up and they're saying, and I was actually at Georgia State University one time when a man, I think his name was Daniel, and I forgot his last name. He was actually telling non-black Muslims, mostly with black Muslims in the audience, about the legacy of Malcolm X and what they needed to know about it. And he was telling them, you think white supremacy is nothing, but you don't understand. Why were your nations colonized in the first place? Putting them in a condition that would make you want to leave them to come over here to the U.S. in the first place. That was white supremacy. So when you say that Malcolm was obsessed with race, no, he understood the white man's obsession with race, and that's who colonized every one of your countries. No matter what their nationality was and their language was, no matter what kind of Christian they were white. He said this. It's on YouTube now, but I can't remember his last name to tell you. What I can tell you is that we are also challenging the elders, because our elders have said things like, we're not going to do this, even though it's a part of Islam, we're not going to do it just because the Arabs do it. We've actually had elders that would say, we're going to try to change this to suit us, and then they still didn't make it militant enough. And we came along and said, you don't change the religion. And you certainly don't do it in order to favor the oppressor that kidnapped us over somebody else that wasn't really that much of an oppressor on the other side of the continent. You don't do that. Because you see, there are actually people that follow Elijah Muhammad's son. And many of them, I'm not sure what Elijah Muhammad's son actually said about this subject, but many of them will be like, well, you can't sit up and refuse to marry that white Muslim woman over there. But then they could tell you that you can refuse to marry the non-white but non-black Muslim woman over there. Wait, make that make sense. Make that make sense. They would say this. They would say that if you go on Hajj, you need to cleanse your heart of hatred for white folks. But then you're supposed to go over there and cuss out the Arabs and the Pakistanis who haven't done anything to you. I'm not saying that none of them ever did. I'm saying that even individuals that didn't do anything to you, that may even reach out to you for friendship, you're supposed to shun them because they ain't real Muslims. But the one from Texas that was calling us nigger a year ago, you can go ahead and trust her with half of your assets and eligibility for alimony after a certain number of years being married to you. I mean, I'm dead serious, bro. So we are actually opposing the elders, so to speak. I'm in the middle between the two, but I've seen it happen. The ones younger than me are opposing the ones my age and older, mostly older. They're doing it, but the actual extent of rebellion is more so from the second generation Arab, Pakistani, and Indian American communities because they're telling their parents something that goes more against what their parents are for. We are not going to prefer white over black. You got a problem with me marrying that dark-skinned Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi woman. She's a good Muslima and she's cute. I'm not going to turn away because she's dark. Now, it's harder for them to say this to their elders than it is for us to say to our elders, we're going to actually implement Islam the way it was revealed. We're not going to reject the hadith. We're going to scrutinize them, but they've already been scrutinized. So we'll categorize, but they've already been categorized. So we'll follow the ones that have evidence and proofs behind them and and actually have a backing from Quranic verses. We'll do that, but we're not going to sit up here and just follow you. You took American nigger culture and placed it over Islam, and Islam was the solution. That's exactly what wound up happening. So because of that, what I wanted to tell you was that all of us are going to have to look at the elders and go in on them about something. But I'm just being fair because I do not side with them over us until they side with justice over somebody else or more than somebody else. That's the only time I'll side with anybody over us. They have to actually be right and just and fair more than we are. And most of the times that don't happen. So I'm sitting up here confessing to you from a pro-blackity black who became Muslim because it's a solution for black people, that they are actually rebelling against the elders privately, but they're doing it more so than we are. It ain't enough of them doing it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the extent of the rebellion is more than ours. Now, the proliferation or the repetition among people of rebellion and confronting elders is more among us. That is a valid point you might make. You also mentioned a racial hierarchy or totem pole and said that black is at the bottom. And that may be true in some parts of the world, but it would depend on even which parts of the Muslim world. To give an example, in North Africa, I'm not really sure if black is at the bottom or if the Indians and Pakistanis are at the bottom. I'm honestly not sure. Now, you might say, oh, come on, black, you know which one it is. No, I actually don't. Because they are in Africa, and a lot of them will tell you that they have black blood in North Africa. So the interracial marriages, if you want to call them interracial, and I do, is more common than it is between them and Indians and Pakistanis. In the Gulf, actually, being black, African or Gulf black citizen is considered better than being a Indian or Pakistani. And the Bengalis are at the bottom in the Gulf. In the Arabian Gulf, they're at the bottom. Everybody's better than them. They can't, it's like this, and they're the ones I actually feel bad for here. They cannot come into many of the Gulf nations to work professional jobs on a Bengali passport. I'm sorry, but that's the proof of the matter. Now, if you are black and you are Nigerian, you can come here as a physician. You may say, well, do they get paid the same as Western physicians? No, they don't. I'm simply saying that they're not at the bottom, that's all. And I'm not saying that to give them a pass, because they still don't respect us enough. They don't hate us, they're not dangerous, they're not violent to us. And to be fair, we're allowed to insult them if they insult us. I mean, actually, you can take them to court and get something like a little over maybe something like 12 or 13,000 US dollars. You could take them to court in some of these countries if they call you a slave and there are witnesses. You got to have witnesses so that you don't just accuse people, take the money. But if there are witnesses and evidence, you can take them and get that kind of money out of them because they called you a slave and somebody heard it or there's proof of it. Yeah, it's illegal to do that. And you can also insult them. You can call them cheese, milk, or something to make fun of them. You may think that that's not making fun of them, but to them, actually, it is. So I'm just saying that it depends on which part of the world you are that determines if you're actually at the bottom or not. Now, when I was in Malaysia, it was the Arabs that were at the bottom. I mean, they could make money, but socially speaking, everybody shunned them. They could only hang out with each other. Now, Arabs are divided. Gulf Arabs don't hang out with anybody else. So if non-Gulf Arabs could hang out with each other, they couldn't really hang out with the Malaysians. Not anymore. But I and my wife, we straight. Yeah, she's from Somalia. And I'm an African American, and some would say, yeah, but see, you're light skinned. That's what made it easier. No. Actually, they were more likely to take to her first until I spoke to them in Bahasa Melayu. Because they know, hey, look, Somalis are cool. They don't have a problem with us. And they know Somalis ain't Arabs. They don't have a problem with Sudanese, South Africans, Somalis. They have a problem with one group of black people, and that is Nigerians. That's it. And that's not because they're black, it's because they're Nigerian. They have problems with Nigerians for the same reasons Nigerians have problems with Nigerians. They talk so much junk and trash to each other that they irritate each other. That's all that is, nothing more. So there is a racial hierarchy. That's true. A lot of Malay women do use skin bleach. So I'm not telling you that there's no issue there. I'm simply saying that the actual racial hierarchy is not always universally black people at the bottom. It is predominantly in many places black people at the bottom. To give you an example, that would be the subcontinent, Pakistan or India. Not so much Bangladesh. I don't know about Sri Lanka, but Pakistan or India, Iran and Afghanistan, blacks at the bottom. And I might be wrong about Iran. And so when you say that you want black people to throw religion in general in the trash bin, I would say the same thing if I didn't know what I know about Islam. I actually said before, black people need religion, but they need something that is black. I said this before. Well, it turns out Islam is universal for, it's actually a solution for oppressed people. Now, you may say, well, then why is anybody oppressed and why are Muslims oppressed? Again, that is in spite of this because of things that they did not implement. And I admit, we got the blueprint for liberation and to not oppress other people when we're on top. We do have the blueprint. Many Muslims don't apply it well enough, which is why you've been able to date and maybe fornicate with some of them. I'm not going to assume it, but I'm not also going to not assume that you stayed with women that you could not get in their drawers. I'm not going to assume either one. So, point I'm making is that you've been able to do it because of many Muslims deciding that they're not going to apply it. Well, during the time of colonization, there were those who called themselves Muslims and they helped the colonizers. They weren't Muslims. I mean, the book says that you can't side with enemies of Muslims against the Muslims and still retain your Islam, but they wouldn't openly do this. But now looking back later on, we knew that they were traitors. And so that is the reason why, and a lot of Muslims, I'll be honest with you, about what a lot of Muslims have done, they have, even before white supremacy coming from Europe, many of them did have this assumption of white normality and black abnormality. Even in North Africa, they had it. But it wasn't a part of the religion. You see, scholars in Morocco and Libya, before they were even independent nations during this, this was even before the United States was independent. And after the U.S. became independent around that time, there were many local people there, just regular run-of-the-mill folks. By this time, they were light-skinned on average. And they believed that the more tropical black Africans to the south of them were naturally slaves. They got that idea from Europe, though. Now, this was a widespread misconception, but to the credit, the scholars in this region, regardless of their own shade, did say, walaikum salam, they did say, they wrote treatises to explain to the people, there is no basis for this. This is actually your understanding of a misunderstanding of a biblical story about some so-called curse of Ham. So that's where this idea came from. So the scholars did try to tell the people. They really did. So in all honesty, we cannot attribute the oppression of black people to the faith of Islam. I'll take that out, sweetie. I'll take that out. Don't worry about it.
It's okay.
Okay. Mahat Sanit. So we cannot attribute the oppression of them to black folks. We can't attribute the oppression of black folks to anybody else to the teachings of Islam. That's not the case. You can't really attribute these things to the teachings of Christianity either. But of course, the Christians were able to successfully hijack everybody's understanding of Christianity. The white Christians were able to. Arabs could not do that with Islam. It was when, see, it's like this. I'm going to tell you this about Christianity, then I'm done. You said that Christianity went through a referendum and it did not survive. The referendum was needed because of Christianity itself after they doctored it. After they did away with whatever it was that Jesus, alayhi salam, actually taught to people. They did away with it. We know that things were actually lost, never to be found again. When, you see, Europe began to excel when they left Christianity. But Muslims had an empire when they did not leave Islam. The Muslim empire declined when Muslims began to not practice Islam and not take it seriously. That's the truth of the matter. Don't take my word for it. Check out Rudolph, Bilal, Ware, and Naeem, Abdullah. These are two that have studied the history of Islam in Africa. You're going to say, yeah, but they're black Muslims. Yeah, but they still studied the history. And they actually found out where Chancellor Williams made his mistakes. Where Yusuf bin Yuhakanan, who ironically became Muslim, made his mistakes, and he admitted his errors. Where John Henry Clark got his info from, which was Chancellor Williams, and they're able to trace Chancellor Williams back to certain errors. You can check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. And you could check out the history of the Muslim empire, if you will. And you could see that it was during the time, the decline of it coincided with local people, regular people, and those in the ruling classes not practicing the faith. Now, everything I've recorded without hatred. But still, you got to take a look at it and see. Don't take my word for it. Take a look. And thank you for sending me the link to this video that I'd forgotten about. I hope that I hope one day that what I've recorded will not be necessary. It's going to be true, but I hope it'll one day not be necessary anymore. To the rest of you all in the audience, thanks for listening. Assalamu alaikum.